All right, 2018 Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio serpentine belt replacement. First thing we're going to do is evacuate the air conditioning freon, and then after that we can start proceeding to remove the front wheels and the front fascia. So let's begin. AC has been discharged. Now we have to remove these 3 covers. To get the side covers here, you get 1, 2, 3. Push pins out. And the center one is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the side one on the passenger side is the same, 1, 2, and 3. Moving forward, we can see we got the covers off and the hardware is exposed. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the push pin and the 10mm for the headlight assembly, the top portion anyway. 3 13s on this side for the radiator support, 1 push pin on this side, 3 T55s, and then another 3 T55s, another push pin, another 3 13mm, another push pin for the headlight, and a 10mm. So let's get that taken off and move on to the next step. After removing those pieces of hardware that I've instructed, you're also going to remove these 2 10s here, as well as these 2 10s here. Remove this bolt here that secures the transmission cooler lines. Again, you got to remove that. Now lift the vehicle and take off the front wheels as well as the wheel well liners. Wheels are off, and now we're going to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 T25s, 1 push pin, 1 10mm here, and 1 10mm here. Repeat that for both sides. Wheel well liner has been removed. Now we're going to remove this T30 securing the fascia here, as well as this connector here for the park assist on the passenger side. Driver's side, we're removing this T30, and then we are also removing this hose, which just requires pulling back this blue tab here. Oh, dropped it. I'll go grab it. But once you remove the hose, water will be coming out. This is your headlight washer, so make sure you have something suitable to catch the fluid underneath. Next, to remove the bolts, the T30s that go along the bottom of the fascia here, to remove the fascia, we need to get the splitter out of the way, the carbon fiber splitter. So we're going to remove 1 13mm nut, 2 13mm screws here, and that's on both sides. So let's do that and show you what it looks like once we get those off. So now carbon fiber spoiler is hanging. We gotta get 1, 2, 3, 4 T30s out, and then we can take this fascia off and expose the other 4 bolts that are securing this carbon fiber spoiler on still. Let's get it. When taking the fascia off, make sure you pull this tab back and then start to pull back. Otherwise, if you start pulling this without pulling this back, you're gonna rip this fascia right here. Front fascia's off. Now we can go ahead and remove 10mm here for the headlight, 10mm here for a headlight. Same thing to the other side. And then disconnect them, obviously, once you start getting them loose. To remove the carbon fiber spoiler, 1, 2, 3, 4. When removing the headlights, the connector should be sitting like this on the back of the headlight. This tab here slides. It's gonna be like that. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. Slide it open, and then it pulls right out. Disengage the hood cable from here, up from here, and just tuck it back over that way. Disconnect the horn by pushing the tab on the bottom here, where my thumb is at, and then sliding back. Do the same thing to the other side. Disconnect the ACC module, squeezing tabs on both sides, and then wiggling and pulling down. Disengage the clip that holds the wiring to the ACC module. On the bottom side here, with the splitter actuator, go ahead and disconnect it on both sides. Remove the two 13mm bolts at the back over there to remove this fascia slash carbon fiber spoiler support brace. That's what the two mount up to right here, remember? Go ahead and remove those 4 bolts, and then we can wiggle this out. Remove these intake boots here, going to the air filter housing, and then remove these 3 17mm nuts that are on both sides, driver and passenger. That one's a little more harder to get to because of the ACC module. Remember how these go on these splitter actuators, because they will only go one way. I've seen guys put them on backwards and the splitter doesn't actually work properly, so remember that. Now when you pull this piece out, you will need to move this a little bit to the side just so I could bypass on both sides. So let's get that. Remove this nut for the shroud cover, as well as this bolt on both sides. So on the driver's side of the radiator, you got 2 hoses, one here, one here. This is for the turbocharger radiator, this is for the engine radiator. To remove these hoses, you simply take a flathead screwdriver, wedge it under, lift up the locking, I guess, spring you can call it. And then you have to wiggle those hoses off. And there will be a lot of coolant coming out. Passenger side, you're going to do the same thing as the driver's side. There's a hose here for the turbocharger radiator, and then this one here goes up here for the engine radiator. Just go ahead, same thing like last time, lift up these tabs, wiggle the hose off, and a bunch of coolant's going to drain out. Now go ahead and remove these tabs right here. Follow the wire harness and disengage this one, disengage this one, and then the same for the passenger side. And then you're also going to find that the radiator fan here is also connected, as well as this temperature sensor here on the radiator. To remove these, or disengage the clips I should say, you want to slide the yellow tab back, push on the black tab, and then slide it out. Next, you're going to either cut and or remove this clip here for this coolant hose. I most of the time just either break it off or cut it off, so that way I can just replace it with a new one. This one doesn't want to cooperate with me on camera, so there we go. Go ahead and remove this hose right after, just slide it up. Now remove these 2 10mm bolts on both sides. Remove these 2 10mm nuts, as well as this 10mm bolt here. Carefully remove these clips here. They are spring loaded, so be careful when you remove them. And make sure you don't lose them, because you do need them to put these transmission cooler lines back in. Tilt the cooling module's AC condenser forward, and then you will see you have to remove this 10mm bolt and disengage this clip here by simply just lifting up on the tab and then spraying it open, and then the hose comes out. But do remove this first. Now go ahead and remove this whole assembly now that nothing's attached to it. Now that all that's out of the way, we get to the fun part. Removing all the cooling hoses, evap hoses, charge air coolers. And then we can see something behind there to get to the belt. Remove this hose, and what should be follow them. They go to the coolant pump down here. Make sure you disconnect it from here. And then you're gonna take off 1, 2, and a third 10 millimeter back there. This is gonna become loose and dismounted from the subframe. And then once you do that, this whole thing should just sit off to the side. You may have to take this hose off, which I like to do, just so that everything's out of the way. Next, we're gonna disconnect this hose here, as well as this one here, and the two right here on the charger. Extremely important tip, when removing this hose, it is clamped to this hose clamp, which is clamped to this main hose clamp. Do not forget when reassembling to pop this hose back in this clip and make sure it's fully locked, because if you don't, this hose will rub against the radiator fan and you will lose all your coolant. Now that all those hoses are removed, what I usually do with this one is I disengage this clip and then disengage this hose from up here, and then I just tie this hose up to the top of the engine so it's out of the way. Because if you try to get this clamp off and wiggle that hose off of there, you're going to be fighting it for an hour. It's not even worth it. Just tie it up. So on this main hose, once you go to tie it up, this zip tie will be in your way. It's holding the connector for the auxiliary pump. Just go ahead and cut the zip tie and make sure you take note of where it is, that way you can replace it once you put everything back together. All right, so next we're gonna disengage these two hoses here. Follow them down, disengage it here. Take this hose off from here by disengaging this clamp. Follow them down, disengage this hose, disengage this clip, disengage this hose from here, sorry. Disengage this clamp again from this hose on the other side, and then take this clip out, this one out, follow the hoses up, disengage it from up here, as well as here and here. So once we get those out, this will make more sense. All right, starting to make more sense here now. Disengage this clip, same as on this side. Take off this clamp, disengage this, take off this clamp, take this hose off completely and put it to the side with the other hoses. So remove the charge air coolers, take this one off, and then you're gonna cut this clamp off and use a new one in its place. Once you get that off, you're gonna take off this nut, this 10 millimeter for this bracket, otherwise you'll break it when you try to take it off, and then this 10 millimeter nut and this 10 millimeter nut. You're gonna do the same for both sides. Starting to make a lot more sense now. Disengage this clip and this one for both sides. And then there's that coolant hose I was telling you to hang up, so it's out of the way. Now remove the bracket for the charge air coolers. So one 6 millimeter, one 8 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 6 millimeter, 6 millimeter, 6 millimeter. And then make sure these hoses are disengaged from here on both sides. And once you get those bolts out, this whole assembly should come off, and then you'll see the belt. Congratulations, we have found the beloved serpentine belt for the Quadrifoglio. Stick a ratchet with an extension there to release the tension on the belt. Remove the belt, put the new one on, and reassemble it.